In the bleak winter of 1939, Europe was teetering on the brink of chaos. Finland, a small nation wedged between the might of the Soviet Union and the relative security of Scandinavia, found itself facing an existential threat. The Winter War, as it would later be known, erupted when the Soviet Union, seeking strategic advantage and territorial expansion, invaded Finland on November 30th. The odds were starkly uneven. Finland, with its modestly equipped army of less than 300,000 men, faced a juggernaut of over 1 million Soviet troops. Equipped with tanks, aircraft, and artillery that dwarfed anything the Finns could muster. Yet, from this daunting imbalance, stories of extraordinary heroism emerged. None more legendary than that of Simo Häyhä, who would come to be feared and revered across battlefields as the White Death. Simo Häyhä was born on December 17, 1905, in the quiet village of Rotjärvi, near the Russian border. The environment of his youth shaped him in ways that would later prove crucial to his survival and skill as a sniper. Raised on a farm in the snow-laden forests of southeastern Finland, he grew accustomed to the harshness of winter, the precision required to hunt for sustenance, and the patience necessary to track elusive prey. Hunting was not merely a pastime. It was an essential skill for survival. Young Simo learned to blend into the natural environment, to remain still for hours, and to read the subtle signs of movement in the forest. These formative years laid the foundation for his uncanny ability to disappear into his surroundings, to anticipate the movements of others, and to strike with deadly accuracy. When war came to Finland, he was 34 years old, man of quiet demeanor, unassuming appearance, yet extraordinary physical endurance and mental focus. Recruited into the Finnish army, he was assigned as a sniper in the 6th Company, tasked with defending the Karelian Isthmus. The terrain itself would become his ally, a frozen expanse of forests, hills and snowy plains that allowed skilled marksmen to exploit the landscape to their advantage. The bitter cold, which might have crippled less hardy soldiers, became a weapon in the hands of Häyhä. Temperatures often plummeted below -40°C. The dense snow blanketed both man and machine alike. While Soviet forces struggled with frostbite, heavy uniforms, and the treacherous terrain, he used the snow and the biting cold to vanish from view, to stalk silently, and to wait for the perfect moment to strike. Häyhä's method was meticulous. He refused to use a scope on his rifle, preferring iron sights that allowed him to keep his face covered, minimizing exposure to the bitter wind and, importantly, reducing the chance of detection. He mastered the art of lying in the snow for hours, his white camouflage blending seamlessly with the frozen landscape. The Finnish military doctrine of the time emphasized guerrilla tactics, mobility, deception, and intimate knowledge of the terrain. He excelled within this framework, turning small groups of soldiers into highly effective units capable of taking on much larger Soviet formations. His ability to estimate distances, calculate windage, and maintain composure under extreme conditions made him a nightmare for Soviet infantry. The legend of the White Death began not merely with skill, but with a series of engagements that seemed almost preternatural in their precision. Soviet troops, unaccustomed to the lethality of Finnish snipers and ill-prepared for winter warfare, began to refer to an unseen marksman whose bullets struck with deadly inevitability. The name White Death was whispered among them, a moniker that encapsulated both the invisibility of his presence and the lethality of his attacks. Reports circulated of entire patrols being annihilated by a single unseen adversary, of officers and soldiers alike succumbing without warning. Häyhä's kills were not haphazard. Each was calculated, each a testament to patience, discipline, and intimate understanding of both rifle and environment. Yet, Simo Häyhä's prowess was more than physical skill. It was psychological warfare in its purest form. By creating fear among the enemy, he disrupted their operations, slowed their advances, and forced them to expend resources attempting to root out a phantom that could be anywhere. This mental aspect of his strategy magnified the impact of his actions. A sniper's success is measured not only in kills, but in the terror inflicted, the constant tension that wears down an opponent. Häyhä's presence loomed larger than life, a specter haunting the frozen forests of Karelia. Even seasoned Soviet soldiers, trained and armed with overwhelming numbers, found themselves hesitant, fearful, and demoralized. Moreover, Häyhä's commitment to his craft went beyond battlefield heroics. He trained relentlessly, adapted to changing conditions, and observed the behavior of enemy troops to refine his tactics. Unlike many who rely on sheer luck or instinct, he approached sniping as a science, understanding the flight of the bullet, the effect of snow and temperature on trajectory, and the psychology of fear. He became a master of concealment, moving with calculated slowness, exploiting every depression, mound, and tree as cover. Each engagement was a lesson in patience, and his diary later revealed meticulous notes on positions, targets, and observations that contributed to his unparalleled effectiveness. By the end of the first months of combat, Häyhä's name was becoming legendary, not just among the Soviets, but within his own ranks. Finnish soldiers began to speak of him in hushed tones, inspired by the man who turned the frozen wilderness into a deadly hunting ground. His extraordinary tally of confirmed kills, eventually reaching 542, was a testament not only to his skill, but to his extraordinary perseverance and strategic brilliance. It was a number that defied comprehension, achieved in conditions that would have defeated even the most hardened soldiers. Yet, behind the myth, there was a man disciplined, focused, and remarkably ordinary in appearance whose extraordinary achievements would etch his name into history. The Winter War itself became a crucible for heroes like he. Finland's resistance against a vastly superior force captured the imagination of the world, and the story of the White Death emerged as one of the most compelling narratives of courage, skill, and indomitable will. In these frozen forests, a man of modest stature and quiet resolve would shape the course of skirmishes, influence morale, and redefine the capabilities of a single sniper in modern warfare. The stage was set for a series of encounters that would not only test Häyhä's limits, but also establish a legend that would endure long after the guns fell silent and the snow began to thaw. As the first frost of December settled over the Karelian Isthmus, Simo Häyhä prepared for another day of vigilance. Each morning was a ritual of survival, checking weapons, studying the snow, observing the enemy, and moving to positions that maximized concealment and effectiveness. The world he navigated was one of extremes: freezing temperatures, silent forests, and the omnipresent threat of enemy fire. Yet within this harsh environment, he thrived. He became the embodiment of the lethal fusion of skill, patience, and mental fortitude. It was here, amid the frozen wilderness of war, that the legend of the White Death was born, a name that would echo across history. A symbol of one man's extraordinary ability to wield precision and fear as weapons in the face of overwhelming odds. As the war dragged into its second month, the frozen forests and snow-clad hills of the Karelian Isthmus became a stage for a struggle that would test the limits of human endurance, skill, and cunning. Simo Häyhä, the quiet farmer-turned-soldier, had by now transformed into a master of his domain, a sniper whose presence, though nearly invisible, reshaped the battlefield. The Soviet offensive, confident in its overwhelming numbers and heavy equipment, began to falter under the relentless precision and psychological impact of the Finnish marksman. He, operating alone or in small teams, became the embodiment of Finland's defiance, a lethal force that seemed to strike from nowhere, leaving devastation in its wake. Häyhä's methodology was deceptively simple, yet executed with extraordinary rigor. He moved like a shadow across the snow, measuring each step to avoid leaving telltale prints that might betray his position. His rifle, a Finnish M2830, was a weapon he knew intimately. Its iron sights became an extension of his own eyes. Unlike many snipers, he refused to rely on scopes, understanding that even the slightest reflection could expose him to enemy fire. The cold was an ally, not a foe, and he learned to use the frozen landscape to his advantage. Snow, wind, and terrain were integrated into his strategy, turning each patrol or ambush into a calculated operation. The forests were alive with opportunity. He would spend hours, sometimes entire days, observing enemy movements from concealed positions. He tracked patterns, studied patrol routes, and noted the timing of Soviet advances. Each observation informed his actions. Every shot was the result of meticulous planning. The psychological effect was as potent as the physical destruction. Soviet soldiers began to fear the forests themselves, knowing that at any moment a bullet could strike from a hidden vantage point. This atmosphere of constant tension slowed their movements and forced commanders to divert resources to counter-sniper measures, further amplifying Häyhä's impact far beyond the immediate casualties he inflicted. His ace effectiveness was not limited to technique alone. He possessed extraordinary patience and resilience. Operating in temperatures that regularly fell below -40 degrees Celsius, he endured frostbite, numbness, and bone-chilling winds that would incapacitate most soldiers. Yet, his training in the harsh Finnish winters of his youth had conditioned him for such extremes. He learned to minimize exposure, using snowdrifts and natural terrain for shelter, and to regulate his breathing to avoid revealing his position. The discipline required to remain motionless for hours, to resist the instinct to move or seek warmth, was immense. It was this combination of mental fortitude, physical endurance, and intimate knowledge of his environment that made he extraordinarily lethal. The toll on the Soviet forces was catastrophic. Häyhä's confirmed kills, already numbering in the hundreds, were only part of his legacy. Entire units began to operate under the constant fear of being targeted, their morale eroded by the uncertainty of where the next shot might come from. Officers learned quickly that even brief exposure could be fatal, forcing them to alter patrol patterns, restrict movements, and expend precious energy and resources on counter-sniper tactics. Häyhä's presence, though largely unseen, had transformed the battlefield into a domain where fear was as deadly as any bullet. Accounts from Finnish soldiers describe he as calm and unassuming, almost blending into the fabric of the forests he defended. Unlike the dramatized images of warriors often portrayed in war propaganda, he was not flamboyant or boastful. He did not seek recognition or accolades. His focus was the mission. This humility, coupled with extraordinary skill, contributed to his effectiveness. He was methodical, relying on careful observation rather than impulse, and always thinking several steps ahead of the enemy. The Soviet soldiers, in contrast, often moved in predictable formations, relying on overwhelming numbers and heavy artillery. Against Häyhä, such advantages were neutralized. The moniker White Death spread rapidly among the Soviet troops, whispered with a mixture of fear and awe. The name captured the essence of the threat he posed, a silent, invisible adversary striking with precision from the snowy wilderness. Stories circulated of patrols being wiped out without warning, of entire squads succumbing to unseen bullets while officers desperately sought to identify the source. Häyhä's kill count grew steadily, each engagement reinforcing his legendary status. Yet, beyond the numbers, it was the psychological effect that defined his impact. By instilling fear and uncertainty, he amplified the defensive capabilities of the Finnish army exponentially. Häyhä's approach also demonstrated a profound understanding of strategy beyond the individual level. By targeting key officers, disrupting supply lines, and creating chaos in enemy formations, he amplified the effectiveness of Finnish defensive operations. Every kill served a tactical purpose, and his ability to strike at crucial moments often tipped the balance in localized engagements. The symbiosis between individual skill and broader strategic impact highlighted Häyhä's genius. He was not merely a sniper in the traditional sense. He was a force multiplier, capable of shaping the course of battles through precision, patience, and calculated lethality. Yet, the life of a sniper was not without risk. Each day in the snow was a gamble, and he faced constant threats, not only from enemy fire, but from the harsh environment itself. Frostbite, hypothermia, and exhaustion were ever-present dangers. Despite these challenges, he continued to operate with remarkable consistency, a testament to his training, discipline, and sheer determination. His success was rooted in preparation, adaptability, and an almost uncanny ability to anticipate enemy behavior. By the midwinter of 1940, Simo Häyhä had become more than a soldier. He was a symbol. To the Finnish people, he represented defiance, resilience, and the extraordinary capability of an individual to influence the tide of war. To the Soviets, he was a phantom, a relentless and invisible killer whose presence haunted every forest and frozen hill. The legend of the White Death was not merely a tale of marksman skill, it was a story of survival, ingenuity, and psychological mastery in one of the harshest theaters of war in history. In this frozen wilderness, he demonstrated that the combination of knowledge, patience, and courage could overcome overwhelming odds. His actions reshaped the battlefield, inspired his comrades, and sowed fear in his adversaries. Each engagement was a testament to human potential under extreme conditions. And the lessons of his methods would echo far beyond the Winter War itself. The story of the White Death was no longer just about one man. 'Twas a narrative of tactical brilliance, strategic insight, and the relentless pursuit of mastery in the most unforgiving of circumstances. As the Winter War entered its harshest months, the forests of the Karelian Isthmus became a deadly chessboard, with Simo Häyhä emerging as the most feared piece on the field. Every Soviet patrol that ventured into the snow-laden terrain risked encountering the cold precision of the White Death. By now, he had honed a method of engagement that was not only extraordinarily lethal, but strategically devastating to the enemy's operations. Each shot he fired was calculated, each movement measured, each day a testament to his relentless discipline and survival instincts. The key to Häyhä's success lay in his intimate knowledge of the terrain. He understood every nuance of the frozen forests, the way snow muffled footsteps, how wind altered the trajectory of a bullet, and how sunlight glinting on ice or metal could reveal a position. Unlike many soldiers, he did not merely react to the enemy, he studied them. Observing Soviet patrols for hours on end, he learned their habits, recognized the signs of nervousness or overconfidence, and struck at the precise moment when they were most vulnerable. His attacks were not impulsive or deliberate actions that reflected a deep understanding of both human behavior and the mechanics of warfare. Häyhä's combat style was brutal in its efficiency. He preferred short-range encounters, which allowed him to maximize accuracy with iron sights while minimizing exposure. Using a Finnish M2830 rifle, he blended traditional marksmanship with improvisation dictated by the unforgiving winter conditions. Snow and ice became tools of camouflage. He would pack snow over his prone body to hide from enemy eyes, remaining motionless for hours. His targets often had no warning, and Soviet soldiers came to fear the sudden, fatal crack of a rifle that seemed to appear from nowhere. Entire patrols were wiped out before they could even react, reinforcing the terror associated with the White Death. But Häyhä's contributions extended beyond his individual kills. His actions disrupted Soviet tactics, slowing advances and forcing commanders to rethink their strategies. Units were diverted to hunt him, wasting time, manpower, and resources that could have been used against Finnish defensive lines. The psychological impact of an invisible enemy who could strike at any moment created tension and fatigue among Soviet troops, eroding morale and cohesion. In effect, he had transformed himself into a strategic asset far greater than the sum of his lethal shots. Reports of his exploits spread rapidly, first through the Finnish army and then to the broader world. Soviet soldiers whispered about a sniper who seemed invincible, a ghost haunting the forests. Accounts describe entire groups being annihilated without a single return shot. Officers falling in the midst of planning, and soldiers freezing in terror as they realized they had become prey. Häyhä's legend grew with every engagement, while other soldiers endured hardship and danger in the open. Häyhä's discipline, patience, and mastery of the elements gave him an edge that was almost superhuman. By January 1940, Häyhä's confirmed kills had already reached an astonishing number, a figure that would eventually total 542. This achievement was unparalleled, especially given the brutal conditions of the Winter War. Each kill represented not just a successful shot, but an exercise in endurance, observation, and tactical planning. Unlike modern warfare, where snipers often rely on technology and distant optics, he relied on instinct, physical prowess, and the intimate connection he had with his environment. The forests themselves became allies, offering concealment, vantage points, and protection from counterattacks. His fame was not limited to the battlefield. Within Finland, he became a symbol of resilience and national pride. Here was a man who, against overwhelming odds, was able to defend his homeland with extraordinary skill and courage. Newspapers and military dispatches highlighted his achievements, although he himself remained modest, almost reticent about his own actions. He did not seek fame or recognition. His focus was the defense of his country and the execution of his duty with precision. This humility only added to the aura of the legend surrounding him. Despite the fear he inspired, he was not invincible. He faced constant danger from both enemy fire and the extreme cold. On March 6, 1940, during one of the final engagements of the Winter War, he was hit in the jaw by an explosive bullet, sustaining a serious injury that could have ended his life. Yet even this near-fatal encounter could not diminish his legacy. He survived, returning from the brink of death to a world that would forever remember him as the White Death. His recovery was a testament not only to his physical resilience, but to the mental fortitude that had allowed him to endure the most extreme conditions of combat without faltering. The impact of Häyhä's actions on the Winter War cannot be overstated. His ability to inflict damage, sow fear, and disrupt enemy operations exemplified the effectiveness of a well-trained sniper operating in favorable terrain. Finnish forces, though vastly outnumbered, leveraged his skills to achieve tactical victories and prolong their resistance against the Soviet advance. The psychological warfare he waged was as important as his physical marksmanship. The constant dread of unseen bullets slowed enemy operations and forced a re-evaluation of tactics. Häyhä's success highlighted the importance of individual skill, patience, and environmental mastery in modern warfare. By the end of the Winter War, Simo Häyhä had become a legend not only in Finland, but internationally. His 542 confirmed kills stood as a record of extraordinary proficiency and dedication. Yet perhaps more importantly, his story inspired generations to come, demonstrating that determination, skill, and intelligence could prevail even in the face of overwhelming adversity. The White Death was not merely a man. He was the embodiment of courage, precision, and the human capacity to turn knowledge, patience, and discipline into a decisive weapon. The forests of Karelia, once silent and untouched, had become a proving ground for the extraordinary. Through snow, ice, and relentless cold, he had carved a legacy that would echo far beyond the confines of the battlefield. The world would come to remember the Winter War not just as a struggle between armies, but as a stage for the unparalleled skill of a single man whose patience, precision, and courage had altered the course of history. In this frozen wilderness, the White Death rose from obscurity to become an enduring symbol of skill, fearlessness, and the power of an individual to shape the tide of war. The Winter War concluded in March 1940, leaving Finland bruised but unbroken. For Simo Häyhä, however, the conflict was far from over. His extraordinary service as the White Death had not only reshaped the battlefield, but also left an indelible mark on the collective consciousness of both allies and adversaries. Though the armistice brought an end to hostilities, it did not erase the memory of his exploits. Surviving a near-fatal headshot to the jaw, he endured the pain, injury, and trauma of combat that few could comprehend. Yet, unlike many soldiers who struggled with fame or post-war adjustment, he returned to the quiet life of a Finnish farmer. A man of modesty and humility, seeking solace in the simplicity of everyday existence. His recovery was slow and painful. The wound to his jaw left lasting effects, and he had to endure years of medical treatment and rehabilitation. Nevertheless, the physical suffering paled in comparison to the psychological burden of having taken so many lives. Häyhä's tally of 542 confirmed kills was not a figure he celebrated. It was a record of duty fulfilled in the most extreme conditions. Unlike cinematic portrayals of soldiers, he did not revel in glory or public recognition. He remained quiet, reflecting a deep respect for the lives he had taken, understanding that each shot represented both survival and loss. The contrast between his modest personal life and his legendary reputation created a compelling duality that fascinated historians, journalists, and military enthusiasts for decades. The legacy of Simo Häyhä extended far beyond personal accomplishment. His methods became case studies in military academies, illustrating the effectiveness of patience, discipline, and environmental mastery. Modern snipers, regardless of nationality, studied his approach to camouflage, marksmanship, and psychological warfare. He demonstrated that knowledge of terrain and human behavior could magnify the power of a single individual, even against overwhelming odds. Häyhä's experiences proved that precision, strategy, and restraint could be more decisive than sheer numbers or brute force. The Finnish military, though small and outnumbered during the Winter War, leveraged this understanding to maximize the effectiveness of their limited resources, a lesson that resonated in conflicts long after the guns fell silent in Karelia. Psychologically, Häyhä's story challenges common perceptions of warfare and heroism. He was not a larger-than-life warrior seeking personal glory. He was a disciplined, methodical, and highly skilled professional executing his duty. His impact came from combining patience, stealth, and acute observational skill with the natural advantages of his environment. This approach contrasts with the glorified images of war often perpetuated in media, emphasizing that true battlefield effectiveness often relies on intellect, preparation, and calm under pressure rather than spectacle. He exemplified the lethal potential of a mind attuned to its surroundings, a theme that resonates in military strategy, historical analysis, and human psychology alike. The mythos of the White Death also underscores the intersection of individual skill and collective consequence. He did not operate in isolation. He was part of a broader defensive network, yet his individual actions created effects that rippled through enemy formations and morale. The terror he inspired among Soviet soldiers slowed their advances, diverted resources, and forced adjustments in strategy that benefited Finnish defensive efforts. His story highlights the unique capacity of a single individual to influence large-scale outcomes, a concept that transcends warfare, extending into discussions of leadership, resilience, and personal mastery. After the war, he returned to civilian life in Rotjärvi, quietly farming the land he had known since childhood. He avoided public attention and rarely discussed the war, yet his legend continued to grow. Historians, journalists, and military enthusiasts sought his testimony, eager to understand the mindset, training, and environment that allowed him to achieve feats that seemed almost superhuman. His life after the war demonstrated that extraordinary achievements do not require a public persona. Quiet excellence and discipline can leave a legacy as enduring as any celebrated act of heroism. The cultural impact of Häyhä's story extends even further. In Finland, he became a symbol of national resilience, courage, and ingenuity. His ability to confront overwhelming odds inspired generations, illustrating the power of preparation, patience, and individual skill. Internationally, the tale of the White Death captivated audiences, blending elements of fear, respect, and admiration. He represents an archetype of the lone warrior whose intelligence, adaptability, and focus shape events far beyond his immediate presence. Moreover, Häyhä's example challenges modern perceptions of warfare. In an era increasingly dominated by technology, drones, and massed firepower, the lessons of the White Death remain relevant. Human skill, environmental mastery, and psychological insight continue to matter. Even amidst mechanized and digital combat, He demonstrated that the human mind, honed through discipline, experience, and careful observation, could achieve outcomes that machines and numbers alone could not. His legacy is a testament to the enduring value of intellect, patience, and adaptability in human conflict. Simo Häyhä's personal philosophy also emerges subtly through his actions. Despite being a highly lethal marksman, he embodied restraint and focus. Every shot was intentional, every engagement calculated, and every action guided by a sense of duty rather than personal gain. This mindset reinforces the notion that true mastery in any domain combines skill with ethical discipline, focus, and respect for the weight of one's actions. Häyhä's life offers insight not only into the mechanics of sniping or military strategy, but into the broader human capacity for excellence, self-control, and moral discernment under extreme conditions. As the decades passed, he lived quietly in Finland, largely removed from the public spotlight. He became a symbol of enduring courage, a figure whose wartime achievements continued to resonate. The legend of the White Death remained alive in books, documentaries, and discussions of military history, ensuring that his story would not be forgotten. His 542 confirmed kills stood not as a mere statistic, but as a representation of discipline, skill, and unwavering dedication in the harshest of circumstances. Simo Häyhä's story does not end with the cessation of hostilities or the return to civilian life. Rather, it extends into the realm of legend, influencing military history, culture, and the understanding of individual impact in warfare. By the conclusion of the Winter War, he had amassed an astonishing 542 confirmed kills, a record that remains unparalleled among snipers in the history of modern warfare. Yet, beyond the numbers, his story represents the convergence of skill, discipline, environment, and psychological mastery, a combination that rendered one man capable of shaping the course of a national conflict. The cultural and historical significance of Häyhä's achievements became evident almost immediately. In Finland, he was celebrated quietly yet profoundly as a national hero, embodying the courage, resilience, and ingenuity that had allowed the small nation to withstand the overwhelming force of the Soviet invasion. Schools, military academies, and historians later studied his methods, emphasizing the strategic brilliance of using terrain, climate, and psychological warfare to multiply the effects of limited resources. His approach was as much about understanding human behavior as it was about marksmanship. By instilling fear and uncertainty among the enemy, he effectively controlled the battlefield without ever engaging in direct, large-scale confrontations. Internationally, Häyhä's legend spread rapidly. Military observers and historians marveled at the efficiency and effectiveness of his tactics. During an era increasingly dominated by tanks, artillery, and mechanized infantry, he demonstrated the profound impact that a highly skilled individual could have when operating within favorable terrain and conditions. His success challenged conventional military assumptions, highlighting the enduring importance of training, discipline, and adaptability. Even decades later, his story continues to inspire snipers, soldiers, and strategists worldwide, illustrating that skillful observation, patience, and psychological acumen can achieve extraordinary outcomes in warfare. Häyhä's psychological approach to combat was particularly revolutionary. While many soldiers focused on aggression or brute force, he relied on patience, restraint, and strategic observation. He understood that fear was a weapon as effective as any rifle. By remaining invisible and unpredictable, he forced Soviet soldiers to expend energy, alter their movements, and operate under constant tension. This subtle yet powerful application of psychological warfare amplified the impact of his actions, far beyond his immediate kills. Entire formations hesitated in his presence, while officers adjusted tactics and supply routes, indirectly strengthening Finnish defensive efforts. In essence, he transformed himself into both a literal and figurative force multiplier, demonstrating the power of mind and method in combat. Despite the fame and mythos surrounding him, he remained deeply humble. He rarely spoke of his exploits, shunning interviews and avoiding public attention. For him, the purpose of his actions was duty, not glory. This humility further enhanced his legend, creating a compelling contrast between the quiet, modest farmer and the almost supernatural figure of the White Death. It is this duality that captures the imagination of historians and enthusiasts alike. A man who achieved feats of extraordinary lethality while maintaining a moral and personal restraint that is rarely seen in tales of war. Häyhä's life challenges the notion that heroism must be flamboyant or self-promoting. His story demonstrates that profound impact often arises from focus, preparation, and disciplined execution. The lessons of Häyhä's career are multifaceted. From a military perspective, he exemplifies the efficacy of small unit tactics, individual initiative, and environmental mastery. From a psychological standpoint, he illustrates the power of anticipation, observation, and the manipulation of fear. From a humanistic perspective, he embodies the potential of restraint, humility, and the pursuit of excellence without the need for recognition. His story resonates not only because of the sheer number of lives he affected, but because it provides a timeless example of how skill, discipline, and intellect can amplify the influence of a single individual in complex and challenging circumstances. Häyhä's legacy also highlights the intersection of legend and history. While the number 542 quantifies his kills, the stories of his actions, his stealth, and his psychological impact transcend mere statistics. The White Death became both a historical figure and a symbol, reminder that warfare is not solely defined by size, technology, or brute force, but by the ingenuity, courage, and mastery of those who wield it. Even today, military scholars and enthusiasts examine Häyhä's methods for insight into sniping, small unit tactics, and the effective integration of psychological warfare into combat strategy. His experience provides enduring lessons on how individual initiative can alter the course of events on a scale much larger than one might expect. As Simo Häyhä aged, he continued to live quietly, farming the land of his youth and maintaining a life marked by simplicity and reflection. He lived to the age of 96, passing away in 2002. Yet his legend lives on, immortalized in books, documentaries, and studies of military history. The story of the White Death transcends time, illustrating that extraordinary skill, discipline, and courage can leave an indelible mark not only on history, but also on the human imagination. Häyhä's life serves as a bridge between the harsh realities of war and the enduring qualities of human determination, focus, and mastery. In conclusion, the saga of Simo Häyhä, known as the White Death, is more than a chronicle of confirmed kills or battlefield exploits. It is a testament to the extraordinary capacity of an individual to harness skill, environment, and psychological insight to achieve outcomes that defy expectation. His story demonstrates the power of patience, preparation, and moral discipline, reminding us that even in the most brutal and unforgiving conditions, one person's mastery can shape history. The forests of the Karelian Isthmus, once silent witnesses to his lethal precision, continue to echo with the legacy of the sniper who became a legend, whose courage and skill will inspire generations long after the winter snow has melted and the echoes of gunfire have faded into history. Simo Häyhä remains eternally the White Death, a symbol of precision, resilience, and the profound impact of a single, determined individual on the course of human events.